Hi and welcome to another extensive tutorial where I'm going to be explaining the panel loops features in ZBrush. We're going to be showing how you can create a different panel loops like seen here. But before we get into it, let me just first invite you to check out the rest of my YouTube channel. I have a bunch of tutorials there where you can learn how to model, sculpt and texture in 3ds Max, ZBrush and Photoshop. Here are the links to 3 of most recent tutorials, so check them out. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe so you get a notification when a new tutorial is being posted. I create 2 tutorials a month. You can also become a patron on my YouTube channel, so you can help me dedicate more time to create more videos, so please check this out. And if you like my videos, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment and do share this tutorial so others can learn something new. The links to the different parts of this tutorial are in the description of this video. So first of all, panel loops can be found under Tools, Geometry and Edge Loop. So we're going to be explaining features that are here. So panel loops works on subtools that have no subdivision levels. So under subtool you should have your subtool selected, and under geometry it shouldn't have any subdivision levels or it won't work. So another thing which is important, panel loops always uses different polygroups, as we can see here, different colors which represent different polygroups. So you have to have polygroups created so panel loops knows where a new loop should be created. So let's get started. Press comma on the keyboard to open up library, go to tools and double click on polysphere, comma again to shut down the library. And as we can see here, by pressing Shift F you can turn on, turn off polygroup visibility, and I have a white matte cap applied to it. You'll probably have something like this. Mask something out, holding Control. I'm masking out, and under polygroups I'm going to set polish group polygons to 1 and click on Group Masked. This way a newly created polygroup has polished edges, so there are not any jaggeds seen. So this is a really nice feature under polygroups. And now if we go back to geometry and under edge loop, we're going to leave the default values as they are. And this for the first part I'm going to explain what a double-sided feature does to your model. So we're going to just click on panel loops. Let me just increase the value to 0.1, so the deformation is going to be seen more obvious. So panel loops, and as you can see, notified me I have subdivision levels still on my object, so I'm going to have to go to geometry and delete the lower subdivision levels. And now under panel loops, click again, and as we can see, it took the original subtool and created new polygons according to these settings. And let me just show you what double feature does. So if you hold Control Shift and click on this polygroup, it's going to isolate it, and if you turn it, you can see you cannot see the backside. So if you want to see it, you have to go down to Display Properties and click on Double. Now you can see the backside of it, but we want to see the whole part. So I'm going to hold Control Shift and A, and this way it shows a part of the subtool that is one unit, so it has no open edges. So if we just Control Shift and click and drag on the canvas to invert the selection, we can see it shows the rest of the subtool, which is also a one solid unit. So we can see the double feature under panel loops created the inner part and the outer part. So these are two different polygroups, and this is really a nice feature that comes in handy if we would like to split this subtool into different parts, because this subtool has two parts that are separate units. We can go under split. You have to have everything visible first and split two parts, but we're not going to do this, but just so you know why this, when this comes in handy. So if we would go back a couple of steps. Now we have no subdivision level and polygroups created, and if we would turn off double and click on panel loops, at the first glance it looks like nothing is different. But if we Control Shift and click on this polygroup and try to show as we did before only this part, which should be a separate unit, we cannot do this, because if we press Control Shift and A, it will show everything, because it didn't create a double-sided separate unit. This is all one unit. So I normally never turn off double feature under panel loops. I don't really see any benefit of it. So this was the explanation of the double feature under panel loops. So sometimes we want to create new panel loops on a specific polygroup without affecting the other polygroups. So let me just show you what I mean. I'm going to show only this part, so I'm going to hold Control Shift and click on this part and press Control Shift A to select everything that is one unit. So we have this back face shown and front face and these loops. So to mask these double-sided subtools, I'm going to just rotate it so you can see the back face. Let me just turn off perspective and hold Shift to mask and just mask something out. And if I rotate it, you can see it applied mask also on the inner part, which is not what I want. So I'm going to hold Control and click and drag on the canvas to get rid of the mask. And now again, hold Control. Do not forget to hold Control. So hold Control, go under Brush, scroll down till you get to Auto Masking, open it up, and click on Back Face Mask. So it is turned on. So if you now mask something out, it will only apply mask to this specific polygroup. So if you turn around, you can see the inner part is not masked, which is exactly what I want. And now if we would mask something out and press Ctrl W to make a new polygroup from the mask selection, and let me just create another selection, Ctrl W to make another polygroup. Let me just see, Ctrl Shift and click on this polygroup to make it visible, and Ctrl Shift click again to make it invisible, and Ctrl Shift click on this one, and now Ctrl Shift then click and drag on the canvas to make an inverted selection. Now if we would apply a panel loop to these polygroups that are shown, it would create a new panel loop. Let me just show you. Panel loop, it created new panel loops here around and here around, but also on these edges, and this is not what I'm looking for. This is a mess. So let me just undo that, and let me just show you what Ignore Polygrouping Borders does. So this is not really a perfect situation, but let me just show you. If you turn it on and apply a panel loop to it, if you remember a second ago I had Ignore Polygrouping Borders turned off, and it created the panel loops on all the shown polygroups. Now Ignore Polygrouping Borders. It ignores polygroups if more than one is shown. This is the easiest way I would say it. So if you turn it off, panel loops, you can see it create loops on the edges of the borders, but when it's turned on, it only created loops on these edges that are open. This is what ignore grouping does. So another thing that I would like to show you is now I would like to only apply a new panel loop to this polygroup. So I have to only Control Shift and click on it, so it's isolated, and now apply a panel loops without ignore grouping turned on, or it doesn't really matter, it's turned on and off. Panel loop, and as you can see, it created a new complete part of this subtool, and it kept every other polygroup untouched. But now if we look closer, we can see that there is a hole in here. So let me just show you more clearly. I'm going to press B, M, T on the keyboard to select Move Topological tool, a brush, and press S on the keyboard to resize the draw size of this brush, and I'm just going to move this part out. And this is really great because this is a separate unit, as you can see, and because I have Move Topological brush selected, I can easily move only this one without affecting this part. So now if we look closely, we can see there is a hole created when we applied panel loops, and sometimes it's not what you want to see in ZBrush models with holes in it, and they are double-sided, because it's going to be a mess if you would apply a Z-remesher or some other effects to it. So how you can get rid of it, let me show you. So I'm going to resize the draw size again, pressing S and moving the slider, and holding Control, I'm going to draw out another mask, Control W, to create a new polygroup from masked selection. And now I'm going to hold Control Shift and click on newly created polygroup, and now I will also turn on Append panel loops. And now if I apply panel loops, it will show everything, and holding Control and click and drag on the canvas to get rid of the mask. And now if you look closely, it created a new solid unit of this subtool, and it also filled out this hole that was created earlier. So this is a hole, and when using Append, you can see their hole is filled. But there is a problem. If we hold Control Shift and click on the top side, we get selected also the hole that has been filled. To get rid of that, I'm just going to separate this into two different polygroups. So I'm going to go under polygroups and click on auto groups, so we have these polygroups in different polygroups. Control Shift and click on the canvas to make everything visible again, and then again Control Shift click on this unit and Control Shift A, and you can see we have a separate complete unit of it. And if we use Move Topological, we can move this part out, and we still have our base subtool without a hole. So this is how you can create a panel loop with having Append turned on. So, but now there's another issue, if you want to call it like that. I'm going to press Shift F to turn off polygroups, and as you can see, because we masked and created a new polygroup from masked area with the polished grouped polygons turned to 1, we have this crisp edge created, and now it is seen, and sometimes you don't want that. So how you can go around With that, we're going to go under polygroup and turn this down to 0. Create another mask. So Shift F, turn on polygroups again. As to resize it a little bit, and let's create a new masked area. And now if I press Ctrl W on the keyboard, I get a new polygroup from masked area. As you can see here, these edges are really jagged. They are not polished as here. But if I turn off polygroups by Shift F, you can see there the edge is not seen, and this is exactly what I'm looking for. Control Shift and click on this side, and now I'm going to explain what polish does. I'm also having Append turned on, and now if I turn this down to 0 polish and apply panel loops, it will create a new solid part of this subtool with the hole filled out, but the edges of this newly created part are really jagged. As you can see here are really nicely polished, and here are really jagged. This is what the polish does. Because it is set to 0, it didn't polish anything, and it looks kind of jagged. So let me just create another one to easily explain how this can be done differently. So Control Mask and Control W to create polygroup. Control Shift click on the polygroup you want the panel loops to be applied to. Apply 5 polish to this selected polygroup and click on panel loops, and now as you can see the newly created part is really polished, which is exactly what I'm looking for. Because if I again Control Shift click in here and under polygroups, auto group, Control Shift click and to make everything visible again, and now with the Move Topological tool, let me just resize it and just move this out. And now you can more easily see the edges of this part and the polished edges of this part. And now if we turn off polygroups by Shift F, you can see you cannot see the edges here, but you can see edges here. So this is what polish can help you do. But also you can see how the newly created panel loops are being kept really sharp and edgy, and here are really polished. So this was what polish feature does. So if you want to know what elevation does and what thickness does, let me show you. So thickness is really self-explanatory. I'm just going to mask out again something really quick, and let me just turn on under polygroups, polish group polygons to 1, because I really like these polished edges of these newly created polygroups. So Control Shift to isolate this polygroup, and under geometry, Append turned on. And now if I play around with elevation, as you can remember, this is the default value, and when we applied the panel loop, it just elevated 100% out of the basic subtool. So sometimes you can create by setting this to 0 and having, let's say we have 6 loops. I'm going to explain what loops are, what loops feature does. So let's just click on panel loops, and as you can see, if you look in closely, there are 3 polygroups outside of the model, and because we have 6 here, we have 3 on the inner part. So let me just go one step back, and I'm going to turn off Append for now, and you can see again, now because Append is turned off, we have a hole in and 3 loops are outside, and if we move this up you can see, and 3 loops are inside, we're inside of the model. So this is what elevation does. So if you would like to create something like totally inwards, set it to -100 panel loops, and you can see it's really in the subtool. But I don't really use that because afterwards I always have option to move this with move topological brush, as I did before. So I normally use elevation at the value of 100. So thickness is how thick is the newly created part going to be. It's that simple. So just play around with this setting and apply panel loops and you will see the difference. So let's look into what bevel does, and with a combination of elevation and this inner feature. So let me just mask out something and Control W to make a new polygroup from this selected area, and again I'm going to Control Shift and click on this one so everything else is hidden. Now if you want to use this inner value, you have to turn off double because it doesn't work if the double is turned on. So turn off double and click on inner, and now if you have elevation set to 100, which is the default value, and bevel to 50, and let's see 6 loops, and we apply a panel loop now, you can see it indented the selected polygroup into the model, similar as before when we explained the elevation, but this time it created the connection between the outer parts and the inner part. And now as you can see, the bevel is also playing a role here, because these loops are being beveled, and the bevel is the value of bevel is set here and the profile is set here. So if you click here, and this graph will open up and it shows how the bevel is looking. So if you look closely, you can see it goes up and down, just like here. So you can play around with these dots, and if you want to get rid of them, just click and drag them out of this field and move them around. If you want to create a new one, just click and it will create a Bezier point, and if you want to have it sharp, you just click on it, drag it out, and still holding the mouse button and pressing Alt and drag it back in, it will create a sharp one. So sometimes I don't want to be beveled, especially if I use the inner bevel, if the inner feature. I normally use bevel, set bevel to 0, and now if I apply a panel loops, you can see I get a really nice indentions. But let me just go one step back and apply a smaller value because it's touching the inner part of the basic model. So now you can see, if you look in closely, you have 6 loops as selected here, and because the bevel is set to 0, it's really straightforward downwards. And now because we have also elevation set to 100, this selected polygroup just went in the basic model. Let's look what happens if we turn this elevation to 0, and again panel loops. It indented 50% into the basic model, but it pushed out the 50% of the value here. So it's just a combination of these two values, and the elevation and the inner feature. So let me just Control Z a couple of times and set this to -100, and now it pushed the value of thickness outside, but just the border. So this is if you are looking something like this to be created, this can be created with inner feature and playing with elevation. And also don't forget, the bevel also plays a role if you want to create a sharp straight down or straight up indentation or extrusion. Well, sometimes you would like to create something like this, which was created on the first step. So you want to create an indentation with a bevel, and then from this shape of the indentation you want to create a separate complete unit, a complete part of this subtool. So now, because you don't want to affect every polygroup that is already created, Shift F to make them visible again, you have to create some additional steps. So let me show you what you have to do. So I'm going to hold Control and mask something out, Control W to make a new polygroup out of it, and Control Shift and click on this polygroup to make it visible and everything else invisible. And now under Geometry Edge Loop, I'm going to turn off Double and Append, and I'm going to turn on Inner and Bevel 50, and I just moved out every unnecessary point with dragging of this grid. And now if I apply a panel loop, it created an indentation with a small bevel, but it's not really, it's a bevel according to this graph profile. So you can see it's a little bit tilted. So now Control Shift and Control click and drag on the canvas to get rid of the mask, and Control Shift and click on this inner part to make it visible, the only thing visible. And now I'm going to turn off Inner, turn on Double, turn on Append, leaving everything else as it is. So bevel 50 and this profile the same and the thickness the same as before. And I'm just going to panel group, and I created a separate complete part, but because we appended, it has two sides in the same polygroups, which we don't want. So just Control Shift and click on it, whoops, and then just go down to polygroups and click on Auto Group, and Control Shift and click on the canvas to make everything visible again, and with the Move Topological tool resize it and just start moving on this part. And as you can see, we created a separate complete part of this basic shape with the double-sided effect and an indentation, just as here. So let's look into what regroup panels does and regroup loops does. So this works best if I create a new polysphere, pressing Command on the keyboard, Tools, double tap on Polysphere, Command on the keyboard. Under Geometry, delete lower subdivision levels, so I don't have any subdivision levels, or these panel loops won't work. And now just create some masking, Control W to create a new poly group, and another one, and another one. And if I would apply panel loops to this, I would get, these are the default values. Let me just increase this thickness so it's more obvious what I'm trying to show, and just click on panel loops, and we can see, as in the start of this tutorial, we have panel loops created with double sides, but we also have different polygroups for each plane of these newly created panel loops. And if I undo that by Control Z and turn on regroup panels and click on panel loops, you can see all the outer facing polygons are in the same polygroup, If I Control Shift and click on them, you can see there are one polygroup, and Control Shift click again and go under Display Properties and click on double. You can see also that the inner parts are also all in one polygroup, but these panels are in a different polygroups. Let me just go back a couple of steps, and now if I go back to geometry and turn on regroup loops also and apply panel loops to it, we can see as before, because regroup panels is turned on, we have all the faces that are facing outwards in the same polygroup. But now as we have regroup loops also turned on, you can see the loops are all in the one separate polygroups, or at least all that are facing in the same way. So you can see, if we just try to isolate this one, you can still see that there are two different polygroups in these loops, but all the polygons that are facing in the same way are in the same polygroups. So this was it for this long extended tutorial. Let me just invite you to check out the rest of my videos, subscribe to my channel, check out the Patreon link, comment this video, like it, share it, and till next time, bye.